Well, here we are in downtown San Carlos, and I'm about to grab some lunch. But first, I want to talk to you guys for a little bit because, what interests me is the people who just do what they want to do with their lives. They're not stuck in getting in their own way. They don't have a lot of hang-ups. They seem to have a lot of inner peace and a lot of inner self-confidence, and they just create the life they want for themselves. And that could be something on a large scale, something very inspiring and dramatic, like these success stories, these success gurus that we have today. Or it could just be someone who is going about a sort of an otherwise anonymous and modest life with a real sense of peace and purpose about it all the while. And the common ingredient for that would really be, um, I think, that they know themselves. They know who they are, and they know what they want, and they just get to it. So we have to focus on the obstacles to the flow of self-knowledge, because you're going to be you your entire life. It doesn't make sense, if you think about it that way, that you shouldn't know yourself, or that you don't know yourself completely, and that your life isn't a faithful and accurate reflection of who you are and what you want to be doing with your time here. That just seems incoherent. That seems very unsatisfying. So I don't believe that somebody needs to figure out who they are. You're already you. You don't need to figure out what you want because you already want it. What we need to work on are the obstacles, removing the obstacles. I believe that peace and equanimity and happiness and enthusiasm for life are intrinsic to us. And all you have to do is observe small children to recognize just how true that is. So what happens along the way? That's what interests me. What interests me is getting to the root of what's standing between us and having a feeling of ownership of our lives and purpose and peace. What are the obstacles? How do we remove them? How do we approach them conceptually in a way that's constructive and allows us to deal with them and make real progress and, as I say, move the dial with respect to those issues? I would say that self-avoidance is the big problem. So let's get into it. I think that we pivot our attention away from thoughts and emotions that are uncomfortable or painful. It's nothing profound to say that we instinctively avoid what's uncomfortable and we run towards what's pleasant. We avoid pain and we seek pleasure. Nothing profound about that. However, it's good that we don't just put our hand on a hot stove or bang our head against a brick wall. But it is a problem if we are habituated to avoiding painful thoughts and emotions, because that's a completely different matter from avoiding what's painful out there in the world. It's good that you should avoid, hurting yourself in the world, but to think that your own thoughts and feelings can actually hurt you, that's where people get into trouble. So first of all, they only hurt you when you avoid them. That's the main thing to flip around. The threat, the real threat to you comes from when you're habituated to avoiding them, because they are there, they are part of you. And what do I mean by they? What are these thoughts? These thoughts are, if you just look inside yourself, if you observe your mind, which you can do, because your awareness and your mind are not quite the same thing, or your awareness and your thoughts are not quite the same. Because if you can be aware of your thoughts, then there is an awareness over here and there's thoughts over here. Like if I say think about pink elephants, and you think about them, and you're conscious of the fact that, yes, right now I'm thinking about them. It's a silly example, but what happened? I'm sure every person watching this visualized a pink elephant for a second and was aware that they were doing it. So you can be aware of your thoughts. You can. So your thoughts are inside you. They're happening whether you want them to or not, right? They just come. I don't think there's a lot of choice in the thoughts that surface. There is a lot of choice in what to do about them. So the thoughts that you move your attention away from the second that they surface, or that the thoughts that embarrass you that you're thinking them, I don't need to run through a list of what those things might be. I think if you're listening to this, you're instinctively sort of going to those feelings and listening to them. And I think they're coming up right now. So I don't need to run through a laundry list. I could, if you need me to. I just don't think that's necessary. So these things that we run away from, that we avoid, that we pivot away from, that we distract ourselves from, they're painful. They're painful because we aren't clear about them. We are not sure what to do with them. Why not? Again, little kids don't have this problem. Most adults do. So it's because of the memes that we pick up. It's because of the habits and the lessons that we pick up from our parents, from our school teachers, eventually from our peer group. And it's things like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Have you ever heard that? I heard that a lot growing up. Maybe you did too. But what is universal is that we get rewarded as children for good behavior, and we get punished for bad behavior. So the kinds of thoughts that don't correspond to the behaviors that are rewarded are seen as things that we should suppress or avoid or run away from in some way, shape, or form. But that doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work, because when you run away from yourself and your thoughts, then you really do get cheated out of that deep confidence in who you are, that deep understanding of really who you are, what you want out of life, what you don't want, and also who you're not. There are so many rooms in the house that you haven't been to and haven't opened, that your own inner being is not a sanctuary or a refuge for you. And if you can't be that for yourself, then you have no choice but to seek that out there in the world. And once again, does that work? It doesn't work, does it? Because the older you get and the more you learn about life and the more distinctions you make about life and the more illusions that are shattered, the sooner you realize that the world is a endlessly complex place, that nothing is permanent. In some ways, there's very little that can be relied upon out there in the world. So you have to be that for you. I have to be that for myself. Everybody has to be that inner sanctuary for themselves. The world can't provide it. The world is too uncertain, too complex, and there is so little out there that we can control in any meaningful way. But, and can we really control ourselves? To a large degree, yes. But we want to be at peace with ourselves. We want to be at peace with things that we can't control by learning how to listen and engage. So that was a clue right there. Obviously, listening and engaging and acknowledging is really the name of the game. It's the end of the avoidance process. And when you stop avoiding all the things that you have been avoiding, you recognize two things. Number one, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's like thinking that a coiled rope is a snake. Until you go and look at it, you could continue to believe that it's a snake. But the second you see the snake is actually just a coiled rope, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's not a fire-breathing dragon. It's not a threat to you. It's a messenger. It's conveying something. All these thoughts that you're thinking, they're really signs that you're uncomfortable. Something is making you uncomfortable, which means that something that's going on is not in alignment with who you are and what you want. There are 1,000 different shades and grades of what that means. There's no one-size-fits-all answer for what these negative thoughts are here to represent. For example, they could mean that you are making choices in your life that you're not really at peace with. Maybe you're in the wrong profession. Maybe you are associating with people who are not nurturing and positive. Maybe you're holding yourself back in your life, in your relationships, in your career, at school, wherever you are. It could mean anything. That's my point. It could mean all kinds of things. It could just be that it's the voice of the sort of inner child rearing its head, the part of you that doesn't want adult responsibilities, the part of you that does not want to have to face the consequences, good or bad, for your actions, the part of you that wants to be parented still to this day. And that's in you because it was ingrained at such a young age. It's unrealistic, and I think it's actually unfair to expect it to go away, because it came when you were so young. It was your earliest programming that somebody is there to pick up the slack, someone's there to take care of you, somebody is going to provide for you, and someone else is going to make sense of the world. So a lot of the time that anxiety is just that programming expressing discomfort with the world that you now know to be too complex for those expectations to be fulfilled, right? So it could mean lots of different things, but you're never going to know what it is that it does mean unless you can listen to it. And when you listen to it, like I said, there's nothing to be afraid of. You realize that very quickly, and you get what the real message is. And then you can start to think about how you're going to reconcile your life on the outside to these messages that you receive from the inside. I can't tell you what's going to change on the outside, but I can reasonably tell you what is going to change on the inside, which is the end of inner conflict. You're not running away from yourself. You're not hiding from yourself. You're not resenting yourself, or even worse, just afraid of yourself. When that ends, then you're actually in a position to negotiate with the rest of the world in the interests of your real identity and your real, the path that you want to walk in this world, because you've got some read on what it is now. You've actually got some clarity on it. So now you're in a position to make choices to the degree that you can. We don't have total freedom. Total freedom, in the words of my spiritual teacher, is omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. So that just doesn't exist for a human in a body. We don't have those kinds of options on the table. So don't expect total freedom, but expect clarity on where you can choose in the interests of what is true for you. And when that happens, you are not an obstacle to yourself. The world is not really an obstacle to you, because you're realistic about the other factors that are in play when it comes to moving in the direction you want to go in. The world is a complicated place, but what's the simplicity that does exist is the coherence inside, knowing who you are, knowing who you're not, knowing what you want, knowing what you don't want, and making what you can out of the hand you've been dealt with that in mind. And what I have noticed is that people who do have that clarity, who do have that lack of resistance to the messages that are coming up from within, they make quite a bit out of their lives. They make quite a bit out of their circumstances. The real problem is you running away from you. So cut it out, all right? Just knock it off. Okay, guys, thanks for your time. My name is Jasvinder, and we'll talk again soon.